Unfortunately, we have no recent or accurate information as based on race to give us any information as to who gets murdered in South Africa, or most importantly also who are the victims of armed robberies in South Africa. What we do know from the National Victims of Crime Survey, a report released in 2017 on house robbery and housebreaking, is that if you have high education levels, you are more likely to be the victim of house robbery. And also you're more at risk if the police's response times are going to be longer. So what this indicates and what the report highlights is that criminals target people possibly because of the goods they have. It shows that most crime in this country is quite opportunistic, and when we look at in this report what gets stolen, it's often electrical equipment, cell phones, laptops, as well as jewelry, cash, and in some instances firearms. So these are commodities that are easy to trade and easy to convert into cash. But there are areas in our country, such as Rondebosch in the Cape, Brooklyn, where our offices are situated, that has a murder rate per 100,000 population very close to or lower than the international homicide rate of 6.2 murders per 100,000 population. We have 50% of our murders taking place in only 13% of our precincts, our police precincts. So murder is unevenly spread in South Africa for different areas. So the areas that have the highest murder rates are exactly in the top 10. You have Nyanga, Khayelitsha, Harare, so that Cape Flats areas. You have Delft, you have Umlazi in KwaZulu-Natal. They are by far township areas. And what we see is that the gangs operate in these townships. So a lot of the robbery victims that are targeted in these townships are hit by their own gangs, but often these gangs move out into other areas. So we've seen, for instance, recent attacks on sort of rural to peripheral farming communities in the Western Capes were committed by these same gangs that operate in those townships. But of course, most of the crimes that we do see, most of the murders we do see from evidence from police dockets show that the vast majority of murders are perpetrated by people known to the victim, and they are often family members, relatives, or people, acquaintances. And I'm not talking about crimes that are committed as part of a robbery. Those do occur, and it's very difficult to estimate, but it's between about 16% and 30% of murders that are committed because of a robbery. When we start looking at robberies that do occur and house break-ins that do go wrong, murder is not the objective of these incidents. The objective is to steal the goods and get out of there. So very often when we do see a violent crime that are perpetrated in these type of cases, it is because there was a threat or perceived threat by somebody that was the victim in that crime. So a couple of reasons why we need to be careful using statistics, police statistics from the apartheid era, as well as even after apartheid, that first decade, is because the police statistics were wholly inaccurate. We are still sitting with problems with the accuracy of the police stats, although they are by all international standards quite reliable now. Furthermore, by now we have got 1,144 police stations that are operational in this country. There were half this in the apartheid era police. Record keeping wasn't their strength. Things were on paper, and very often there were no-go areas in places such as townships, which made the picking up of bodies even really difficult. So very often the murder statistics were incredibly skewed. They were highly inaccurate. And we took close on a decade after democracy in 1994 to try and fix these murders or crime statistics, most notably the reliable one, murder statistics. Now, the most reliable statistics in the country we have are the police statistics. We will never get away from that. Okay. And for an incident such as murder, the cases are quite the number of murders are quite reliable. Okay. Stats SA some years ago estimated that, according to the National Victims of Crime Survey, we're looking at a 93% accuracy in terms of reporting rate. Also understand is that when we start looking at, so the most accurate thing or numbers we do have are actual dead bodies to measure. But of course, mortuaries cannot investigate under what circumstances somebody was shot. All they establish is whether it is self-inflicted. They cannot tell you if it's an accidental shooting or whether it's an intentional shooting. So in the apartheid years, especially race-based data, such as murder, was incredibly unevenly collected and recorded. We have to understand that because of the complexities of the country, the fact that there were no-go areas, the fact that the police weren't present everywhere. We had former Bantustans whose crime stats weren't even counted. So then you have tribal authorities that took charge of some of the areas. So often there weren't even autopsies done or police involved. The tribal authorities would deal with matters. So in the Bantustans, their data were counted very separately. Okay. So that data is very dangerous to use, very patchy, very uneven. And you cannot also look at the race data and because the population, the censuses weren't even recorded. So very often that population data was also wrong. And we could do some estimates to try and control for population growth. But it's really important to understand that you have to use population data to normalize any raw figure, to understand if the problem has increased, decreased, or stayed the same. Now, to illustrate, we at the moment, what people don't want to often hear or people are surprised about is the fact that when we started looking at murder since 1994, the murder rate, if we start normalizing for population, for those first census data the first census we did in 1996 and working a little bit backwards, we found that the murder rate by 1994, it was almost 68 murders per 100,000. That is it is more than abnormally high. It is off the chart. Off the charts, it is. Because we did have a form of civil war, a lot of faction fighting, a lot of... And during this time, we also saw quite instability politically and so forth. And then as we saw this decrease in the murder rate. By 2011, 2012, the murder rate more than halved by 55%. Now, and we reached almost 30 murders per 100,000 population. Of course, we have seen slight increases, actually, a 13% increase in that murder rate in the past 5 years, mostly because of an increase in robberies and an increase in firearms being in circulation again. So we have seen an increase in robberies as opposed to burglaries, and it coincides, this increase in robbery, and that is, so the difference between a robbery and a theft is that a robbery a robbery has associated with the property theft a threat of harm or actual harm against the person. There are many reasons why robberies have been increasing, most notably the increase in laptops, cell phones, and electronic equipment that we have on our person. We have made our cars so safe that when we're not in them, that they are at their most vulnerable when we're in them.
Yes.
So that trackers can be disabled. We have no alarm systems activated at the time we are driving them. So the same with house robberies. Our homes with their alarm systems and their high walls and electric fences has made it very difficult for burglars to come in. But we are vulnerable when we have switched off all of those. We have our laptops on us and on our cell phones, and we are then at home when people come in. So if they know we've got nice flat screen TVs and so forth, the risk for them is not as big as the reward of the electronic equipment they can carry away and sell. The so-called trio crimes, namely house robbery, house burglary, business robbery, and hijacking.
Yeah.
These are the crimes we fear the most.
Yeah.
But because it seems that the police are unable to deal with this, certain groups have been able to take to build some of these cases into I think a myth of genocide, a myth of that it's only whites being targeted, where we know that it is it's crimes that are rife across the board, most notably in urban areas where they happen on a daily basis. But often they are not seen as brutal because there's less time to commit these crimes in urban areas.
Yeah.
Plus, the likelihood of finding firearms and cash in urban areas are far less likely.